This pattern is Yorkshire cobblestone derived from England. We traveled to Yorkshire, England to capture this natural cobblestone. The stones there are beautiful. The granite cobblestones, we were able to pull natural textures from the granite cobblestones, and we hit it right on in terms of the authenticity of the texture, but also the width and the depth of the grout joint. The tool size is approximately from one end over to this end, about 5 feet long by approximately 2 feet wide. This set includes 6 rigid tools, a flexible floppy tool, which is great for getting up into tight areas for detailing edges, perhaps up against a column or the edge of a building. It comes with a running bond cobble border. This is great for not only a border on the edge, but if you're stamping up against an area where you cannot fit a full tool, you could pop this tool in and create 2 courses. It also comes with a soldier course bond tool for borders, in addition to 3 individual stones if you need to finish off a set such as this. It also comes with a 2 foot by 2 foot texture skin, touch-up skin in the matching texture, a 1 foot by 1 foot touch-up skin, again fortified, great for doing vertical stair faces or perhaps in a nice tight area. It also comes with a half floppy tool, which is really great for getting into hard areas, and the fact that you don't have to fight the full tool is great for the craftsman. The tool also comes with the matching touch-up wheel for the grout joints. It's not only the proper width, but also the texture is the same. Let's go show you how this tool works. On our Yorkshire Cobble, you'll notice over here we have something that's called a demarcation line. And what this line represents, it starts the next row of tools. So you don't have to sit here and measure with a tape measure. So what this represents is a bond line. So you have a bond line from this block, then here, so you simply start your next row of tools on that demarcation line. As you can see, the sand bed is a great learning and teaching aid and holds the definition of the stamp imprint beautifully. Let's take it from the sandbox to our actual pour. We'll start with the coloring process using a broadcast color hardener. All right, we've poured our 10 yards of concrete here. Dave is bull floating. John and Cody and I are addressing the edges with our hand floats. And then immediately followed by that, we're going to go ahead and put our first application of our dry shake color hardener for our Yorkshire cobblestone pour here. We're going to be using Brickform CH615, which is a stone gray color hardener, at a coverage rate of about 1 bucket per 100 square feet. Dave is doing the final stages on the bowl float, trying to bring just a little bit of moisture and some cream to the surface. Cody's addressing some of the edges. The next step is to get our color hardener ready. Now, if you remember, I mentioned this is 10 cubic yards of concrete. So we did the calculations. There's 540 square feet. So if we use 1 bucket per 100 square feet, that's roughly 5.5 buckets or 6. So we'll round to the nearest bucket. So that's 6 buckets. You'll notice over here we have 3 buckets on one side. We have 3 buckets on the opposite side. So we're ready to go. Before you open the lid, it's a great idea to turn the buckets over and roll them upside down. And what that does is it loosens the color hardener. If you don't do that, the material becomes compact, and when you throw it, you'll get a big clump out there. So you want the material to be real fluffy when you throw it out there. And what I mean by fluffy is, if you look here, it just rolls right off of our fingertips. So we're ready to get started. Now, on an area that's roughly 12, 13 feet wide like we have here, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to throw as far as I possibly can to the opposite side while the other team on the other side throws towards me. You don't want to start on the edges first like this, because when I start throwing the material way out here, a lot of it's going to fall right here. So we don't want to mound this material up. We want a nice uniform layer. If it clumps up in a dome or like a volcano, it'll never absorb enough moisture. So you got to make sure you throw it in a uniform fashion. The fashion is starting with an underhand, and it's a fairly violent throw going to the overhand. So we'll get busy on that. In this powder, there's cement and there's also silica. So that's very, very harmful to breathe. So you want to protect yourself with a dust mask at the minimum. So go ahead and put your dust mask on before you start throwing.
You want to start from the top?
All right, on a windy day, we've put our first broadcast of color hardener. Now you want to apply the color hardener in 2 mists, 60% on the first application, bull float it in, which is what Dave is doing, and then you apply the remaining 40%. However, we've got a real cold, windy day. So what Rusty's doing is he's spraying a product that's called Control Finish. It's what we call an evaporation retardant. It kind of locks a teeny bit of bleed water in, and it helps the color hardener wet out. So he's applying just a uniform mist over the entire surface shortly after we broadcast our first application of color hardener. Now you never slow down in this sequence. It's a continual process from the time we start pouring the concrete. What Dave is doing over here, he's bull floating our first application. Now if you have the proper mix design and you're putting the color hardener on at the right time, you'll notice that he's able to get 95% of the color hardener worked in with the bull float. And that's because we have the appropriate mix design. If we had a mix design that had real high air or a lot of water reducer in there, the color hardener simply wouldn't wet out and we'd be playing havoc trying to work this in. So this is what you're looking for. Even on a 3-inch slump, if you remember when we slumped this, this panel for our Yorkshire Cobble, it was a pretty dry mix, 3 to 3.5 inch slump, yet Dave is still able to work it right in. You'll notice right behind Dave is John catching the edges on this side. And then over here, Cody is also catching the edges. So you never want to slow down in the process. You always want to stay ahead of the game when you're stamping. It's very critical. If you wait as little as 20 minutes in between steps, you could get 20 minutes behind, which could spell disaster by the time you get to the end. So John is floating the edges, and then he's running his hand edger. And what this does is it helps the color hardener turn over the edge. So we like to do this with each step. Right now, right behind John and Cody, we're going to come right back with our second application, our remaining 40% of the color hardener, and then we're going to do this all over again, meaning we're going to bull float it again, and the guys are going to hand edge the edges. Okay, we have our second broadcast of color hardener. It's all floated in and edged. This is one of the last several steps before we actually start placing the stamps. We're going to put on what we call a flash or an accent color. So we've used 100% coverage with stone gray. We're now going to flash it with what we call medium gray, just to make it look realistic. All we're doing is we're putting a light application. One thing you do not want to do when you do an accent is you don't want to streak the color like this. Because if you look at a natural stone, you don't see these streaks going from stone to stone. So you want to just do a real organic broadcast, light broadcast, highs and lows over the entire surface, and then we're going to work this in with the trowel. The steel trowel, sometimes referred to as the Fresno, is an excellent tool to work in our accent color hardener. Remember, the concrete at this stage is over 2 hours old, and we're not using this tool to work in the previous applications of color hardener, with the fear being prematurely sealing the surface. When using this tool to work in your accent or your flash color, make sure and use different angles and directions so it works in naturally. You don't want to just go up and back, so use opposing directions as you see here. Okay, we've got our last accent color of medium gray color hardener. It's all been troweled in. The edges look awesome. The next step is to talk about the stamps. Before we do that, I'd like to make an observation. What we did is we took into account the width of 7 of these Yorkshire Cobble stamps, and if we formed it accurately, we should be able to go down that straight edge where the asphalt is, and our stamp should end up right exactly on the edge of this form, which means that there's no reason to cut the stakes flush or drive them down flush. You'll notice that John is applying the powdered release. He's applying the antique powder release, and 1 bucket of the powder release usually yields roughly 1,000 square feet of surface area. In addition to that, you'll notice over here we have our stamps all laid out ready to go, and the guys have already put powder on them. So you need to precondition the stamp mats with a light layer of powder release. And by doing this, this helps give additional bond breaking where the stamps won't stick to the fresh concrete. So we have Cody over here and Rusty on the bottom edge, and what they're doing is they're taking the matching seamless texture skin, so we get nice texture right up against the edge, and Dave comes right on behind, and we're ready to start our stamping process with our Yorkshire Cobble. On our Yorkshire Cobble, we have 2 different designs, which has a different stone configuration on the bottom of the stamp. We have a Roman numeral number 1 and a Roman numeral number 2. So you just want to keep flipping the tools so you don't see a repeating stone. And we're about ready to get busy on this 540 square feet. Over here, Dave's going to use the flexible mat because we have a curb edge right over here. So this is a great example of where a rigid tool would not work. So he's used the flexible mat, which allows it to bend right up the curve. You'll notice we've got our stair step, but we're always maintaining our straight edge. So the guys are always starting with a couple rows out front, and then they're running this tool on a diagonal. Now you'll notice right at the same time, when the stamps are lifted, John's coming right now with the matching touch-up roller that comes in this set, the Yorkshire Cobble set. So it has the matching texture, and he's doing a great job of adjusting the joints. And also, up here at the form edge, you'll notice what we've done is look right here. We're within 1/8 of an inch, and actually it's better that the form is just a little bit shorter. So the forms are right on where they need to be, and we don't have to interfere with any of the stakes whatsoever. All right, we just completed our Yorkshire cobblestone pour here. Everything went great, and despite still being cold, it's probably no warmer than about 40 degrees. Had we not step retarded it on this last half, it would have got a little bit tight with that 2% NCA. You'll notice that over on this end, Dave's doing a little bit of last detail work. He's taking the 1 foot by 1 foot touch-up skin. He's just adding some texture. Rusty's over here detailing the edges. And one last observation, we've already determined where our saw contraction joints are going to be. So if you'll notice over here, we've already chalked a line. So we'll come back roughly 12 hours or tomorrow morning, and we've chalked a line. This is where the measurement would have ended up. However, we just moved it over 2 inches so it ends up in the middle of a bond line. So tomorrow morning we'll come, first thing that we'll do before we do any detailing is we'll make our contraction joints, which there's going to be 2 in this panel, and then we'll move on to the next step, which is to detail and clean the release off. On our Yorkshire cobblestone, we've washed away the majority of the powder release. Panel looks beautiful. As a recap, we used stone gray color hardener on the surface as our primary color, and then we accented it or flashed it with a medium gray color hardener, And then before we stamped it, we used a dark gray powdered release. And then of course we went over the top of that with our Yorkshire cobblestone. Looks great. We hope you've enjoyed our chapter on Yorkshire Cobble. With some additional practice and some good color combinations, you can also produce some beautiful stamped concrete.